Superman and Lois, Season 4. This is the spoiler review. I have a review on my blog, soundedbettermyhead.com. There are a few small spoilers in there. It's kind of hard to do this season without getting some spoilers, but I try to keep it to the minimum. So if you want to check that out and avoid some most spoilers, go for it. I ended up giving this season a 4 out of 5. I think I'm pretty happy with that grade. It was another solid season of what's always been a solid show. Obviously, this is the final season. They had a lot to cram in here. I think they rushed it a bit, but they kind of minimalized most of the main cast outside of the Kents. They did try to work them in. I think sometimes it felt like they were just being thrown in there to give them something to do, just to kind of like keep their stories going. And I think they kind of hurt because it felt like other things had to be rushed. Especially, I think the way season 3 ended, a lot of them were all kind of going their own separate ways anyways. So it's like, if they didn't show up at all, I think storyline-wise, it would have worked out for most of the characters. This season starts almost exactly where the last season left off, with Superman fighting Doomsday in space. Not very surprising, especially with the trailers we got, that they do basically roll into their version of the death of Superman. Pretty good job. I think it was about what you would expect from the death of Superman, and especially their interpretation of it. I think the only disappointment is like how quickly they resolved it, especially because obviously Superman's the main character. It's like you can't not have him in his own show. At one point, it looked like we were going to mostly get him in flashbacks and as basically the AI Forces of Solitude version, which I think would have worked for a few episodes. Then you build up to like a dramatic, return of Superman. I was pretty shocked. Like the third episode, he was back, and it was slightly unceremoniously back, but it was fine. And then thing with Superman being dead, it's like it gave a better excuse for Luthor and Doomsday to kind of be in the background and not being an active threat. And once he's back, granted, Luthor didn't know for a while that Clark was back or Superman was back, but once he did, it's like, all right, this should be like the end already. And I mean, it did kind of pick up a little bit, but I don't know. It just kind of felt they had to have Luthor kind of feel like he was spinning his wheels by bringing Clark back that fast. And then, I mean, a lot of the plot was just, as far as the rest of the family, just a little about Lois' credibility being damaged. There wasn't a lot going on with that. The boys, most of the romantic subplots they've had to deal with were gone. There was a little bit with Jonathan and Candace, but for the most part, you got Jordan not wanting to be the hero anymore, especially now that Jonathan's got powers, which is another story arc that I thought felt rushed. It was a pretty drawn out story with Jordan when he initially got his powers. And yeah, I know Jonathan's more of an athlete, and you see like he would pick up on these powers a little bit faster, but basically he got all the powers and pretty much mastered them like initially, immediately. So that felt a little bit rushed to me. Again, last season you only got 10 episodes to work with. They also did a lot where they kept more and more building towards, for the boys to be successful, they got to work together as a team. Like their teamwork is going to make them on par with the Superman. And we really didn't get that. Like we had a very brief training montage near the end of them trying to work as a team, and it's like they had to stop before they even accomplished anything. And then even when they did finally, team up for Doomsday, like they both just kind of distracted him and like flew like really fast, and he had to follow them. And it's like you almost feel like he could have just followed one of them. Like he did not even have to follow them both like that. So they felt like that just didn't really go anywhere. Luthor, we got just weird. I don't know how this really compares to some of the comic version of him. Him being just this single-minded about, he doesn't care about anything else but getting his revenge. They did edge him closer and closer to the classic Luther. Like eventually you get him in a suit, you get rid of the goatee, you get rid of that kind of heavy metal Luther they had been doing up to this point, which it worked, but I kind of got used to this alternate version of Luther by this point, so it's like, oh, now it's like feels like a different character. I mean, he acted the same, but he just looked so different. But I mean, that's the gist of the plot. I mean, I think the other big story was that the people in Smallville realized Clark and Superman were the same person. So some interesting stuff with that. It looked like they were gonna just kind of skip over it for a minute, and they had that really awesome episode where Superman basically said, "You know what? I'm gonna have to reveal myself to the world and just let them know who I am." I thought that was really well done. They really dug into like the lonely side of being Superman, having to like keep everybody at arm's length and lie all the time so they don't find out who he was. So I thought that was a really well done episode. You know, just the one initial, just the reveal of himself, and then going into like, you know, him, the reveal of the Smallville people, and then him going on the news and broadcasting it. Like I said, and as far as the other supporting characters that are main cast members or whatever, just not much going on. And they just, whatever, you know, family kind of nonsense with Kyle and Chrissy. And yeah, they had some really nice moments playing up their friendship with the Kents. But for the most part, none of their stuff really felt that important to this final season. At least Lana's stuff was tied to Luther for the most part. They really didn't have anything for Sarah to do, and she's just kind of there because she's Sarah. And you know, I think her sister showed up like 1 or 2 episodes, didn't even get a word of dialogue, even though she sprouted like 2 feet since last season. Like I said, they wrote off John Henry and Natalie last season, and they kind of had to find a way to bring them back, and their stuff really wasn't anything special. It's like, oh, do we want to work for the government or not? And then it just, I don't know, just felt like it didn't really go anywhere. It was nice to see them back, but it's like, okay, where is this going? You know, you kind of take away from some more. You got other stuff feeling rushed in the main stories just to get these other stories in. But, and then when you get to the final episode, I thought before the final episode, we got one of the most comic accurate Doomsdays we've ever seen. So that was really awesome. Thought the fight was a little lackluster. Wasn't too much more than, I think the first fight was way better between Superman and Doomsday. This one was just so-so. The Superman and Luthor fight was fairly mediocre, and it ended relatively quickly. I mean, you had the 2 fights basically just took up half the runtime of the episode, and it just, none of them were like really like, wow. I mean, there was a couple cool moments, but overall I'm like, could have been better. And I anticipated that most of the show would be basically a long epilogue. And is there anything else? And then as far as that epilogue, I wasn't surprised to see a time jump, but the first time jump was to Lana and John Henry's wedding, and it's like I was never all that invested in their relationship. Not saying I was against it. It's just like, okay, this isn't really doing much for me. It's just kind of, you know, they were really just kind of getting into it. And then it's like, okay, by the way, they got married. And then Kyle and Chrissy had a baby, and another one's on the way. And it's just like, okay, that's fine. But I wasn't just like, I almost rather have gotten the Kyle Chrissy wedding finally. But because I was a little bit more invested in that story. And then we did this really weird Superman narrating post-mortem about like his life after this and what he did over the next like 30 some odd years. And you know, there's some cool stuff. It kind of sucked that they had to recast Jonathan and Jordan as adults, which is like, I don't know, because I kind of feel like given a few years, those guys aren't gonna look anything like the guys they brought in to play, and these guys are like pretty big dudes, and it's like, yeah, I kind of feel like these kids are gonna look more or less like this a few years from now too. So it just kind of threw me. It's like I didn't see that as how they're gonna look in a couple years. It's a nitpick, but it just kind of threw me. Especially you get this pretty gut punch of a moment where we find out like cancer did come back, and it is what killed Lois, and having to see these like basically strangers reacting to it. I think it lost a little something, but the moment itself was kind of devastating, just knowing what she went through all last season trying to fight cancer, and a little bit this season about her trying to get over everything. And That was really well done. And then Superman's death itself was just fine. And it could have been cheesy, but they did this nice little thing where he's like almost like an afterlife, and he's seeing his friends and family as they were in their prime, more or less. And kind of would have been nice if they threw a couple other people in there. It would have been nice if they could have got his mom back in there, because she did appear in an episode. It would have been really cool to see like a version of his Kryptonian mother that wasn't AI, to kind of see her more in the flesh. I think that would have been a kind of nice touch, but I think they tried to keep it a little bit simple. But it was a nice little way of wrapping up the whole series. Like they did a lot of traditional Superman stuff, but they also did things their own way, and it's kind of like, all right, we did our own thing, and we're just kind of we're just gonna end it. We did our own version of Superman, and this is like a complete story. But I think that's about it. I think I'm just gonna go ahead and see if I got anything in my notes that I didn't mention yet. Actually, right off the bat, I didn't really get into the first fight was Doomsday. I thought was really well done. There's some really cool stuff with it, where they were in space, how the low gravity affected things, and the exploding meteors or whatever, asteroids. I thought that was all really cool. I hated there was a lot of flashbacks with Lex, which helped explain his his mindset a little bit, but it's like this kind of felt like they slowed things down a bit, and he always looks silly with the wig that they put him in. I was also shocked that there was a big deal about Lex taking Superman's heart, and it seemed like he had a special device built to do something with it, and nothing came of it. He just ended up stomping on the heart just to kind of piss off the kids, which I would think that Superman's heart would still be semi-indestructible because it's a Kryptonian heart. I guess, I don't know, the device has weakened it or something, I don't know, but I just kind of felt like that heart would have, for the longest time I thought he had the real heart hidden somewhere else, and that was like a fake. Overall, the show looked pretty good as always, especially for a TV budget. Definitely was a little wonky CG, especially with Doomsday, especially when he's interacting with like a normal person. Definitely looked very green screen when they were hanging out in the Arctic to practice their powers, which it looked like that last time they showed it. Almost any time they go to the Arctic, it just never looks, like they're really there. There's a cool sequence where Lex changed all the streetlights to like a red sun, and he depowered Clark and was able to fight him. But it's like, when the hell did Milton change the lights? Like it's not something you could do from a computer, terminal. It'll just make all the lights red kryptonite or red sunlights. Because even when they got rid of them, guys actually had to physically come and take the lights off. Unless I missed a scene early on where the guys were working on the lights. I don't know when you had time to swap them out. A couple cute nods to some of the previous Superman movies, like Jimmy showing these saves that Clark was doing when it looked like a nod to the helicopter in the first Superman, or the Eiffel Tower elevator in the second Superman. Nice little touch. I was disappointed that after stealing John Henry's suit, it just basically looked like the same suit, except maybe slightly bigger to fit Lex, instead of the classic purple and green or some variant of that. Like the closer they got is that the heads-up display in the helmet was red and green, or purple and green. I did crack up a bit with when the boys got their own menu items at the diner, and Jordan had the little box of fries where the fries kind of looked like his hair, and he had the little picture of him with the goggles on it. It was cool seeing Bruno back, and I'm glad that they explained why, because the whole thing the last season was how they got Lex thrown in jail, and then they never explained why they framed Lex, and now you see, okay, he was doing some evil shit in that neighborhood, and that's how they took him down. There's another nice moment where when first Superman was fighting Doomsday again, the boys started doing their saves, and it was cool that Jordan calling back his kind of anxiety attacks that he used to have and trying to calm this lady out to help her out, and just Jonathan just doing flat out, Superman stuff. I think that's all that's worth talking about. Those I could probably pick and choose other things to throw in this review, but I don't want to go on for too long. Just like I said, overall, another solid season. Tiny bit rushed, especially when they felt like they were spending time on some not so important story arcs for some of the other main characters that were basically not quite demoted this season, but knocked down on their screen time. And like I said, a few other things felt rushed, like Jonathan's whole power thing, and the boys becoming like a team to fight together. But again, I still think this is one of the best interpretations of Superman, and especially this is the best interpretation I think of him and Lois's relationship, and we've also never really seen outside like comics is like the family thing where Superman's got kids and him and Lois are raising a family. I thought this was like a really unique approach, and I think they just really nailed all the emotional aspects of this, the story throughout. I mean, the superhero stuff was really cool too, but you really got invested in this family like throughout the 4 seasons, and really cared about like them and their relationships. But that's about it. Like I said, I do have the mostly spoiler-free version of this. I got other reviews for movies, comics, movies, TV shows. I got my comic strips, like I started to say. And if you want to check any of those out, that's at soundofbettermyhead.com. On that, thanks for watching.